Good afternoon and welcome to this GIRI forum, and it's dedicated to introducing you to our new GIRI framework. This is an interactive session, and so please get ready to contribute with your thoughts and comments. And the webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing via our website and YouTube links. I'm joined today by Chris Shrubshall and Oana Sala of Expedition Engineering, and they've been the main force in the development of the framework process. And somebody's not on mute. And I'm going to give a short introduction about GIRI for those of you who are less familiar with us, and then hand over to Chris to lead the session. On the housekeeping front, we've muted microphones as you come in, so please unmute if you're invited to speak or during the interactive sessions or Q&A, and then mute up again afterwards. If you don't mind leaving on your videos, that sometimes helps to give the meeting a little bit more vitality. I leave that with you. So if any questions do come to mind as we go through, use the chat box and we'll try and pick them up during the Q&A session, but we will record the chat and seek to answer any outstanding queries after the event if necessary. If you have any tech problems, well, we adopt the usual IT support tactic: turn off and try again, i.e. leave the meeting and rejoin us using the same link. So that's enough of the housekeeping. So in 2015, following a discussion at the ICE on the impact of error on productivity, a research project was organised with input from a number of organisations in the industry. The research showed there was a potential cost of error in the region of 21% of turnover when direct and indirect costs were taken into account. And in response to this research, GIRI was established as a not-for-profit membership-based organisation with a strategic aim of improving industry productivity through the elimination of error by specifically addressing the root causes. The research demonstrated the link between error, elimination and productivity, and this helped to convince businesses in the industry as to the benefits of investing in a zero-error programme. So let's take a look at the timeline of GIRI development leading to this step change in terms of our offer to the industry through our framework, which draws together the many strands of the GIRI approach and the training tools and reports that we've developed over the years. So GIRI was established back in 2017 as a limited company, and Tom Barton was our executive director. The Improving Value by Eliminating Error, Strategy for Change and Call for Action were published by GIRI, and we were formally launched at the IC by Sir John Armitt. During 2018 and through 2019, we worked with the CITB funding on the development of our training courses. And in 2019, we produced our best practice guide for designers, or certainly the design guide as we now call it. The GIRI training program is further developed, and we had our first of our research reports into technology. And by the end of 2019, we had our GIRI leadership, interfaces and supervisor courses completed and accredited by the CITB. And GTC was established and course delivery commenced in 2020. We had a new communications manager in 2020 as well. In 2021, we had lockdown webinars. I was appointed as the executive director on the sad passing of Tom Barton. And we established our strategic leadership group to take a wider look at the upper echelons, shall we say, of the construction industry. And we created the Tom Barton Award to recognise his contribution. The Train the Trainer course was developed, and we were invited by CLC to take part in the creation of an error reduction indicator. So CITB funding was then announced in 2022 for the Train the Trainer rollout. We worked with HS2 on the error reduction work stream, and we were invited to join the BSI on one of their development subcommittees. We reacted to the BSA, the Building Safety Act, by the creation of a steering group, and our design guide was updated with its own video in 2022. Last year, we continued to liaise and collaborate with a number of organisations, produced an insurance guide, 2 further technology guides, and we spent the latter part of the year developing our error reduction framework. Our original research demonstrated that link between error elimination and productivity, and established our initial strategy on that basis. But the world is changing, and boardrooms are recognising the broader range of imperatives they need to satisfy, including safety, sustainability and quality. And an error-free strategy provides a platform for achieving all those. And our strategic aim now reflects this. And on that basis, I'm now going to hand over to Chris, who's going to take us through the first introduction of the framework. Thanks, Chris.
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you, and
Perfect.
I can see your presentation.
That's great.
Yeah, perfect. Oana's very cleverly worked out how we can share our slides and see the notes, which is very helpful. So yeah, I was just looking at how many people have joined us, and it was over 70. So I really appreciate everyone sparing the time to come and listen to us waffle on about error. So I'm Chris Shrubshall. I'm an Associate Director at Expedition, and myself and Oana have been working with Cliff and GIRI sort of since sort of summertime last year to develop this framework. So the sort of running order, and we've got a little bit more time than we had at the AGM, so we hopefully not have to whip through it too quickly, but equally there's detail in it that we obviously can't cover today. So we will go through the information, that the extra information is available, and how you can kind of register and get a bit more support with all the implementation of this. So I'll start off with like a brief introduction of the framework, why the framework, and what we've done broadly, and then Oana will do the main bulk of explaining to everyone where we've got to, and then between Cliff and I will do a little bit of a wrap up at the end. So if I start with, is it going to let us go on?
There you go.
Perfect. Hopefully that's clicked onto the first slide for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to sort of set the scene a little bit, and to pick up from where Cliff left off, is basically with all the work through GIRI and its members, I think more and more businesses and projects are understanding that there is a cost to error, and that it's significant. And moreover, they're starting to realise that addressing error is more of an investment than it is purely a cost or an overhead. And by investment, we mean that you might spend money running an error reduction program, but you would expect to see a return on that investment by some lower outturn cost. So your project gets done more efficiently, effectively. But the next question for us and for GIRI was, well, so what now? So if you're a business or a project and you understand that there is this error, well, what do you do now? And you know, this the tools and the techniques that are available, that, you know, there's lots kind of out there already. I'm very aware that I'm probably talking to a group of people who are very advanced in their thinking around quality assurance and quality management, and will be very familiar with a lot of the tools available. And certainly it was feedback we got when we kind of first presented this over summer. So really the role of the framework and creating a framework is to create almost an investable process that businesses and projects can pick up and run. So it's not about creating brand new tools unless they're necessary. It's more about organising them into a logical step-by-step process. And we believe that helps businesses, and from the conversations we've had, businesses and projects to pick up, run and invest in quality and on error reduction programs. And so what we're about to present here is really GIRI's first step towards what we would call a minimum viable product of a framework that businesses can pick up and run. And by that we mean it's a first iteration, and we're expecting people to run it and have feedback, and for us to engage with those members who have run it and see how it's working for them. And the next slide, I think I'll just read out because it's best that I get it right. So the best way we've found to describe the error reduction framework is that it's a standardized, structured, step-by-step process that can be used by companies, organizations and project teams to systematically identify, diagnose and reduce errors. So it's very much about organizing the tools that are out there already and putting them into an order and a way of thinking that we believe and we have used with businesses to reduce error in their systems. And I think the next slide is really just explaining the timeline we've been through. So this sort of work has been developed over the last 6 months or so. We did run a workshop in summer, which I know some of you attending came to that as well, and the feedback there was incredibly helpful for us. We presented this in December at the AGM, and this is really a follow-up now to catch up with the people who couldn't make that AGM, and also to explain a little bit more about towards the end about how we see this being implemented with GIRI members. And then just finally, just to touch on the things or the material that is available, and we'll wrap up at the end of this as well. But the two key documents that are worth being aware of on the left there are the framework guide itself. So this kind of is the sort of our suggested step-by-step approach. And then the second document below that is basically a collation of all the tools that are used within that guide, within that framework, in that step-by-step process. And again, I just reiterate, they're not all revolutionary new tools. A lot of them are out there already. We've just tried to structure the way that you might use them. And on the right, there's a series of supporting documents that kind of sit alongside those main documents, and that you can kind of refer back to. A key one that I think Oana will dip into is the maturity tool, which is again another one that's been developed kind of with GIRI to help support this process. So I'll pass over to Oana now, and she'll take you through a little bit more detail on the framework itself, and then, as I say, we'll wrap up at the end a little bit with how we see this kind of being implemented by the membership.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Chris. Right, let me see if it works. Great. So as Chris said, I'm going to give an overview of the framework. It should be about like 20 minutes, and at the end you can ask any questions about it. The way in which I'm going to present this section is going to be in 4 main parts, and it's going to start with the framework approach, which will cover the underlying principles of the framework, and it's going to explain what we need to do to achieve a successful outcome. Then we're going to move into the framework steps, and this is going to explain how we can achieve that through a step-by-step process methodology that we've put together. And at the end, we are going to talk about key enabler actions, and these are actions that we recommend doing before implementing the framework to ensure a successful delivery of the framework. And finally, I'm going to explain a little bit about the tools, an overview of the tools that you can use across the steps of the framework to help you with the delivery. And this consists mainly of widely industry used tools, and a few GIRI developed tools and the GIRI training that we have so far. Perfect. So the framework is based on a systems change approach. And this really means that understanding the system, which might be an organization, a project, or a program, plus defining the intervention based on your system needs, will lead to effective outcomes. And most importantly, it leads to an improved system that can eventually support an error-free environment. And why we took this approach? This is because understanding the system can help you target the factors that are leading to error and not just the error itself. So what is the system? So if you think of a system as an organization, project, or program, I've kind of like added this diagram here because we think that it explains quite well like what the system is. But each system, so your project, each system is like kind of defined by a common purpose, the process and people within it, the context in which they work, externalities, and it's defined by a boundary. So by defining each of the area of the system, the errors and the factors leading to errors, it gives you a good understanding of the system and the underperforming areas that you have. So once you have a good understanding of the system, you can then move into defining the interventions. And this is the part where you plan and do. You define the interventions to target those underperforming areas, and you plan how the interventions can be delivered. And just to make it a bit more clear and give it a bit of context, for example, let's take in like a drainage rework case, if the main issue is the main issue can be lack of communication between site delivery and design, you need to think what interventions can you use to streamline this process, and then how can it be deployed, taking into consideration the existing processes and boundaries of the system. And eventually, once all of these interventions are implemented, the outcome will be in the form of a new system, ideally that eliminates error. And in the example of the drainage system, for example, you might have included, a new training that can help you with the factors that lead to error. You might include environmental cues, but what you're actually doing is you're changing like areas of the system, and then practically the way it works and the probability to lead to error. And really, this framework has a continuous improvement aspect, because you need to take each underperforming area bit by bit. And then this is how, kind of like taking one area at a time, you improve your system in an iterative manner, ideally reaching, a project that has very little probability to support error and leads to an error-free environment. So moving into the key steps, and this is how we can achieve the four main areas of the framework, which is understanding the system, developing the intervention, leading to analyzing the outcome. You need to start by the system analysis. So you begin by understanding the system through using the system definition diagram or other system diagrams to define really the purpose, as we've seen previously, the context, people, externalities, and the boundaries of the system. And then you understand the underperforming areas you need through things like gathering comprehensive data on errors such as NCRs, error lists, maybe reported defects, but you also really need to look into data that could show you where the errors are, such as cost of repairs, delays, waste quantities, and maybe things like anecdotal evidence through workshops in which you kind of gather together the key people that have knowledge about these areas. So once you have an idea of that, you then move into the detailed diagnosis phase. And in this part, you really carry out detailed diagnosis to explore and identify those root causes that lead to errors. So at this stage, you can use tools like, I'm going to go through sort of like the tool mapping, but it's tools like you might have heard of this process mapping, finite element analysis, 5 whys, or the GIRI matrix. And this is to understand the system and those underperforming areas and also validate them. So once you kind of understand that, you move into developing the intervention and the implementation plan. And interventions can be developed through expert working groups or various other tools that help you define the best intervention for your system, and then validate them through tools such as like pilot testing. A program is then created to implement the intervention, taking into account people, processes, and all of the key areas of the system. Any such change program should adopt established best practice models, and is really important to include matrix and clear governance structures. So once we have that, we've implemented the interventions, we move into the analyzing the outcome phase. The first part of that is measuring and reporting. Really here you need to measure against the predefined matrix in the earlier step. And then you can measure the effectiveness of your intervention by using tools such as the GIRI matrix that looks into the factors that lead to error earlier in the framework. And finally, as I presented earlier, the iterative part of this framework is the learning and sustaining. This is where you kind of see what you've targeted so far, you learn from it, and then you think, what is the next step? So those were the steps of the framework of how we can achieve every single step. And as I said, there are key enabler actions which we think are really important to make sure to successfully and effectively deliver this framework. And there are 3 main actions, which are getting leadership support, evaluating error impact, and assessing your organizational readiness. So getting leadership support, these are things like, engaging your leadership group. Some of you here are probably with part of the leadership group. Otherwise, it's a kind of like a mixture of quality managers and leadership group, but really talking about and understanding if there are errors in your organization, and if this is something you sort of like want to apply and try out. Then the second one is understanding if there is error in your organization, and you can do this to sort of an error workshop, but really it's a requirement that you do the GIRI leadership training, because this training gives you both, it's getting leadership support, and it has a part in which you kind of go through some exercises to understand what are the bigger underperforming areas in your organization. And third, I'm gonna present the error maturity matrix in the next slide, but this is a way to understand how ready is your organization in managing error. And this is a really important part to do, because it gives you kind of like as you can see here, is quite little, but it kind of shows you the areas where you could improve in targeting and managing error in your organization. So as I said, we've spent some time to look through these steps and understand, and this is from experience with HS2 as well, what tools can you use at each stage to deliver those steps. And in the top part of the diagram, there are the either GIRI training or GIRI developed tools that we've developed at this stage. Some of them are really based on experience and things that GIRI have done previously, but we've just put them in a good template so that people can use them now. So these are things like briefings. The most time we spent on the GIRI maturity matrix that I'm going to present, and in the bottom part is the industry recommended tools, so things like stakeholder definition tool when you're wondering, what key people to actually bring in the room to discuss things, the 5 whys, fishbone analysis, process mapping, value stream mapping. It's like a kind of a myriad of tools that you can use across the whole process. So as I said, the GIRI maturity matrix, this is a matrix which was developed based on the COM-B behavior model. What this model says is that practically behaviors are driven by capability, opportunity, and motivation. And in any kind of case, if you look at these things, you can figure out what went wrong and what led to that behavior. So taking this behavior model, we thought what key factors sit under each area of this behavior. So for example, under physical capability, you need physical competence, competency assurance, tools and equipment, training and development. So we did that for each of these areas of the COM-B model. And we've put this into an Excel to kind of, you can use this either with the organizations or individuals within your organization to do an assessment of it. It's like a really easy to use tool where you can ask people how do they feel about all of these statements from 0 to 10, and then it's going to give you a result in the form of a chart that shows you sort of like the big areas that you need to target. And these are key factors that lead to error. They are not errors. Perfect. So in summary, the GIRI approach to error reduction is key enabler actions, the systems change framework approach, and then the key steps that help you deliver that approach, which is supported by the GIRI tools presented previously. And this is just a summary that Chris showed as well. The material available, key documents are the framework guide, which takes you through what I've presented today and kind of maybe a bit more details on the key steps. The toolkit guide, which gives you the map and then a description of each of the tools. Obviously, it's a very high-level description, but by repetition, you kind of learn how to use them. And then the supporting documents, which are the executive brief, the methodology to use the GIRI matrix tool, and based on kind of GIRI research and previous knowledge, we've put together an Excel spreadsheet of error lists, which also you can use at that initial stage to maybe get some ideas about common errors that are used in the industry. Perfect. So now I'm gonna pass it on to Chris to summarize the next steps.
Thanks, Oana. Oana's done, as always, a very good job of getting through a lot of material in a very short space of time. So now we've got, it always feels a little slightly salesy reading this bit here, but I think it's important to just go back and summarize why we think adopting a framework approach to reducing error is important. So we're saying it improves an organization's ability to identify, address, and prevent error, and it does that in a structured, effective, and proactive way. We think it offers an opportunity to tackle systemic issues within an organizational project, and that it leads to longer lasting improvements in organizational culture and behavior improvement. And a lot of this is based on our and GIRI's work with people like HS2 and running error reduction programs with them. And it provides a strategic approach to tackling error. So certainly, as Oana covered in the sort of enabler actions, getting senior support and integrating stakeholders we think is super important to these adopting this framework. But it's not. It has to be. It might be sort of advocated for in a sort of a bottom-up way, but it really does have to be sponsored at the highest level. And ultimately, the whole framework is about deepening the understanding of the root causes of error. So it's not it's not a high level review of error. It is a process by which we should be picking our way through the actual known problem and what is actually causing error and addressing it. And we should be doing that, as I say, in kind of a strategic way. What happens now, basically, you can register your interest in knowing more about the framework via a survey that we will share in an email at the end of this. And the reason for doing that is that we are very keen to support organisations and projects in implementing the framework. So I think maybe if I skip on to the next slide. So interestingly, after creating the framework, one of the big questions was, what is the best way to disseminate the framework? And so like webinars like this are obviously very helpful, and hopefully it's given you or everyone listening in a little bit more of an insight into what we've been doing and hopefully you can start seeing how you might adopt this framework. But certainly from our perspective, we don't know how different organizations and people on this call will adopt the framework. So, you know, we're starting to think that there's a kind of a tiering approach to how businesses and people and projects might pick up the framework, and that kind of ranges on a spectrum from what we've called sort of tier 1, which is basically as a project or a business, you've got full leadership buy-in, you've got an experienced team of you know, quality managers or people who have run these sorts of programs before, and basically, you know, you don't really need the support of anyone else to facilitate the framework itself, and you'd be more than happy to pick it up yourself. And indeed, in that case, you may well be doing elements of this already, but maybe not in this particular format. And it kind of ranges through kind of a tier 2 up to a tier 3, where actually you've got the leadership buy-in, but you really, apart from that, you're not sure as a business or a project how you might adopt the framework and what's the process of running it, and what is the best process for running it. So that's kind of where we're thinking at the moment, and the purpose of the survey is really to start understanding which of all the members that are on this call and people who have seen the framework so far are in a position to start picking up and adopting the framework. And it's worth just saying at the bottom that we think that one of the key enablers of the framework is that it links very closely with the GIRI leadership course, and that is kind of a key measure of like how ready your business is to sort of like, or how supportive an environment it is from the leadership perspective to like pick up the framework and adopt it. So the way that we see it running at the moment is once we've got some responses to the surveys and we can understand from everyone where you're at as a business or a project in terms of like senior buy-in to running an error reduction program, we would myself and Oana and Cliff would essentially run a half-day course with members who intend to run the GIRI framework, and we would help you understand whereabouts you sit on that spectrum between needing facilitation and not needing facilitation. And once we've established that is the point at which we effectively step into the workshop, and that's either, as I say, you running the framework yourself, or as a business without facilitation, or with some support from GIRI, or with a lot of, with full sort of facilitation kind of service. Cliff, you haven't jumped in, so I'm assuming that you've got, I don't know whether you've got anything particular to add to that before we jump into Q&A.
Yeah, I'm off mute now. Yeah, this 4 steps, I think step 1 was the going on the GIRI leadership course. We think is crucial. A number of people companies and organisations have already been on the course, and I think they'll be the ones that are more likely to be in the sort of tier 1 section. Initial discussions is to help people to understand where that, you know, we'll have the surveys back, but we'll talk to people, and so they can understand that what's making that decision about the facilitation at step 3. And then GIRI's got some skin in this game, and we're willing to sponsor a workshop, which would be a day's worth of training of some sort to get things moving, and we're willing to sponsor that and do one of those for free, as it were, for people who have committed to going forward with the framework. So it helps you into the implementation, and that's what those 4 steps are for.
Thanks, Kev.
Perfect. So I think, yeah, now we can move into the Q&A. I'll stop sharing. And let's see the view. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Well, we've had some questions coming through, or comments coming through. I noted a number from Peter Love, which I understand the sort of nature of the queries and the comments, but if you remember back when we did our workshop in, what was it, August, September, one of the things that the people present felt was that we needed to be careful we weren't making the exercise too academic, and that we were trying to root it in the sort of world of the construction project and the construction businesses. And the other thing I think we've always had at the back of our mind is that there have been a number of reports, research work done on the ills of the construction industry and what we need to do to change it. We had Latham, we had Egan, more recently we've had the Farmer report, and these reports all made a lot of sense, but they then perhaps didn't deliver. So what this step change, if you like, with GIRI, we felt we've over the years we've come up with some really good stuff in terms of what you can do to help you avoid error, and now we're really looking to help you to really go in and implement systems to do, not just say. And so yes, there will be continuing debate about, well, what's an error and how you define it, but I think we've moved past that, and we really want people to grip the idea that there are errors, there are defects, there are whatever mistakes, whatever you want to call them. We want to get rid of those because they're really affecting what we deliver in the construction industry, and the GIRI frameworks really can help you do that. So if I can find the chat box. That could be it. That's the participant panel. Anybody got any ideas? Anyway, if anyone can see the chat box,
yeah,
can they read out a question from it? Alternatively, if you've got something, you could raise your hand and we can go to you that way.
yeah, we can see the chat. There are a few questions from yeah, Peter. Should we start with the first one? Practically, or you can also, like, we can have like a conversation, Peter, but you're kind of like asking what do we mean by errors in decision making, or action errors or violations. Different strategies are required to address them. So if it would help if we can define that.
Yeah, I mean, the framework kind of, the idea is that it applies to anything that's an outcome of which you did not want. But I think that's probably the best way to say it, and whether the idea is to get to the root causes of those errors. So if one of your, if you identify at the beginning of the framework in your sort of diagnosis phase that you, as a business or a project, you seem to be making a lot of poor decisions, then that would be something that you then pass into kind of your detailed analysis phase, and you'd be looking at using the tools, some of the tools and techniques in the framework to understand, why are you making poor decisions. So that would and equally it could be, the error could be a very kind of physical error, i.e., our concrete quality is always very poor. Why that? So the GIRI framework is deliberately, it is a challenge, but the GIRI framework has been created deliberately to not prioritize one thing over another. It is if it is an error, you should be able to take this framework and apply it. And like you say, you might use some of the different tools that we've identified, and some might be more appropriate than others. But again, that comes down to how much support you feel you need as a business in order to implement this. So that's the sort of thing that is very hard to write into a framework that you can just, that no one needs any support to do, because a lot of the choice in tools and how you run the process, run the framework for different sources of error may well be different.
This issue about what's a system and what does that mean? I think, a system is perhaps buying, your procurement is a system. You could analyze you could use the framework to see how procurement is affecting your outturn root cause. There could be errors there that are causing issues later in the piece. GIRI's talked about product substitution during procurement from what's been specified for all sorts of good reasons, but that can have knock-on impacts. And how is that managed? You can go into change management. There's all sorts of systems that a company will have or a project will have that the framework can be adapted to suit, because it's flexible, but it's systematic, going through a series of steps. There's a question there from Simon about the hard data on the cost of error. Always a difficult one, because we have asked a lot of times for sharing of data on that so that we can evaluate, but businesses generally aren't happy about sharing data on the cost of error. But I think it's worth bearing in mind in terms of the GIRI approach, which was initially set up about productivity. And if you think about productivity, we use past performance as our gauge for productivity on the next project. So if you're putting together a program or a price, you often utilize your book of outputs that you've had on projects over the years. Now, those very productivity data you've got stored away that you use, that's where the error is. If you're going to improve, you've got not only eradicate the error, but then show the results of that through using better productivity outputs for the future, and that's where the improvement will come. Now, demonstrating that is a challenge, and that's why we work more towards the maturity matrix kind of approach to show that your business is improving in its error elimination. So,
I think the other thing worth bearing in mind is that and I think it kind of goes, but I think Emma made the good point that this isn't about, the framework isn't about being revolutionary, but it is a resolution to act and do things right, which I think is a really good thing to bear in mind. So by putting a formal sort of framework in place, it forces you as a project or a business to start your own measurements. So the idea being that at the beginning of the framework, or when you first identify the error or the result of the error, it forces you to then put in place some measure to look at whether you are improving that by putting some implementation in place. or some intervention in place. Sorry. So all the sort of queries about construction sector wide ROI is obviously always going to be very hard because projects vary from very small to very large. But what the framework should be doing is encouraging people to set their own measures and start measuring at the beginning of the framework so that they can say, back to Oana's point, my drainage that I put in is wrong and it's costing me blah. And I know that by the time I put my intervention, I can go back and measure that and are we doing it better? So, like I say, it's a commitment to act and do things basically as much as anything else.
There's a couple of questions there about one about implementation of the framework. Well, the framework was only came into existence on the 1st of December 2023, so it hasn't been implemented as such, but we did effectively run the process through the tunnelling asset, the earthworks asset, and the stations asset on HS2 during the trial stages. So there is some evidence that there's been a beneficial implementation. In terms of David Lamb, what is the expected return over time? Well, we've demonstrated that there's an overall direct and indirect cost of error, and we will be trying to across industry get data to show, get some sort of metric to show that things are improving. The expected return, I mean, I've said on occasion, if you take the safety example in terms of behavioural change having a serious effect on the on-site safety, we were talking about 20 years from when John Prescott in 2003 said, the construction industry needs to pull up its bootstraps and do something about safety. Well, it took a long time for us to get to where we are now, but things have improved demonstrably. Whether you've got how you would measure that that's improved would be, we've got less deaths, we've got less accidents, and I guess over time we'll have a metric which the industry will agree. We're looking for an error frequency rate similar to the accident frequency rate, and if we can get the industry to agree something like that, then we'll be able to monitor the improvements. What the GIRI framework's doing is giving you a systematic way of addressing the difficulties in your business. Peter loves not agreeing, but he's agreeing not to disagree. There, that's the way to go ahead. Would management system be easier terminology given the range of quality safety professionals who engage with GIRI? We did talk about that, but we thought we should just stick with system because it might not be a management system as such. It might be a particular operation on site, which isn't a management system. So I don't know whether you've got any comment on that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other bits in there about sort of naming convention is not the right word, nomenclature or whatever. But and I expect when I look at them in detail, I won't disagree with any of them. I think we've bumped around a few times over the last month or so, renaming and rewording things, and I think it's kind of back to that MVP idea that, provided we all understand what we mean and that we can understand what it's doing, we can use it, and there will be and should be another iteration of this in the hopefully not too distant future, but that kind of wraps in all of this feedback and that we kind of do that in one big hit. So I completely agree. There's a lot of name thing, and it's not unimportant as well, but I'm not trying to say it's not important. I think as long as we know what we're doing and we know what it says and what it means, then it meets that sort of MVP label, but we should definitely have a revision of it where we consider again some of the naming stuff, if that starts sort of helps and makes things clearer.
Yeah.
We have we clearly understand that there are management system, quality management systems, quality assurance, whatever you want to call it, that exists in the industry and has done for many years. You know, quality assurance. Without, of course, you can't tell I haven't got any grey hairs, but I started in the industry in 1980 doing quality assurance. We've been doing quality assurance for 40 odd years, to my knowledge, and quality management systems, and we've got all sorts of things, but that didn't eradicate error. And we're looking at this from through a slightly different perspective, you know, looking at things the other way round, trying to avoid error, not and that is clearly a lot of the businesses that will think about adopting this approach will have existing management systems and have certification of compliance with ISO 9001, probably 14001 and 27001 and 45001, and have all those, but we're still making errors. So what are we going to do about it? And that's where GIRI, and that's where this framework steps into the picture.
Yeah, and just wanted to add on that is like this element of behavior at the sort of, it's like really key to driving, you know, error. And I mean, Peter was like saying, like, we need to define it. I mean, like any error that you made, you know, it's like kind of like driven by an underlying behavior. So it's like really important to think of it like that way, and then use all of these tools to, you know, define where that comes from. And that this kind of links it to Steve Williams' comment as well on like how can the framework look at improving the tendency for cost and program. I mean, applying this framework is going to show if, you know, your errors are actually coming from the process and because some people made the decision about cost and program. And it's a really useful tool to kind of say, look, this is why we are, you know, getting this quality. So that's at least like how I see it, but obviously like applying it a few times, we're going to see how it works best in practice.
I think, like you say, it's about understanding root causes, isn't it? So the framework doesn't do anything other than try to get you to the root cause of error in the most structured way possible. So it is very simple in some ways. You have an error, you have something that is going wrong, and the purpose of the framework is to get you to the root cause of that, to allow you to then come up with an intervention that tackles it. So it's sort of, in essence, it's a very simple process that could become very complicated, but actually, in its essence, it's about finding root causes of errors and then killing them off as quickly as you can.
Yeah. So yes, there's some similarity. We've talked about Lean Six Sigma and the other tools that are available in not just the construction industry, but are used in all sorts of production industries. And there's a nod to those, definitely, but we feel that sometimes you're not quite sure which particular tool to use at what particular phase of the journey, and that's what we've tried to simplify that with it. I think it's key what Chris was saying there, that, you know, we've really tried to make this as simple as possible so that people do it. You know, we want to do something, and we've had a lot of discussion, we've done research and reports and got feedback, but now we're suggesting this is a way that you can actually do something about error in your business. You kind of have to accept that there's some of it there. If you think that you've got all the systems and management and controls in place that you haven't got any errors, then that'd be wonderful. Let us know how you've done it. But what we're doing is trying to give you a way of finding what the issues are, what the root causes are, and doing something about them. How are we doing for time? 13:56. We've got 4 minutes left. I think, I mean, I was going to do a wrap up, at this stage, but I think the responses, the questions and our responses probably tell most of the story. And you know, in conclusion, if you like, the amount of interest that's been shown to date is great. Thank you very much. We want this interest to continue through into people actually using the framework. And as I say, we will assist by providing support through those enabler actions, attending the leadership course, having the key briefings, and so that you can implement as you see fit to your businesses. And we are going to the people that have registered on this webinar, and those who'd separately registered their interest since the members meeting in December, but haven't been able to make it today. We've developed a fairly short survey just to gauge the levels of interest, and we'll be sending those out via email. And if you can respond to those, that would be very helpful for us to sort of get together how we take things forward and who to really focus. We're trying to get a pilot scheme moving, possibly two, with a couple of businesses who've already showed some level of commitment. So watch this space. But if you'd like to have a go, get in touch. And thank you very much for coming on today. Thanks, Oana. Thanks, Chris. We move forward again.